I still remember that morning as if it happened yesterday. The office at Summit Dynamics, where I had worked for 7 years, always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and overworked ambition. The air was cold enough to keep everyone awake, though no one really wanted to be there. I sat in the 12th floor conference room, hands on an old notebook, trying to look calm while Mason, the executive director, smiled that polished smile everyone recognized, the kind that usually came before good news, for someone who wasn't me. First of all, Mason began, voice smooth like a rehearsed speech. I want to thank everyone for giving your best this quarter, especially the data analytics team. You saved the Helix Tech project from falling behind. And now I'm pleased to announce the new senior data strategist. I didn't feel excitement anymore, just quiet expectation. Riley Summers, he said. The room burst into applause. Riley, who had been with the company for less than a year, smiled brightly, as if this were the well-earned climax of a hard-fought journey. I just sat there, feeling the blood in my veins slow to a crawl. The 11th time. I wasn't mistaken. I'd written down every one of them in this notebook. 11 rejections. 11 empty promises of just a little more effort. 11 rotations between hope and disappointment. Mason turned to me, trying to add a touch of humanity to the same old script. Harper, don't think your contributions go unnoticed. You're always on the list of potential promotions for next quarter. I nodded, automatic, emotionless. I had heard that exact line, word for word, 10 times before. When the meeting ended, I gathered my notebook, ready to slip out quietly, when Riley walked up, latte in hand, head tilted. Hey, Harper, I hope you're not too upset. You know how these things go. Timing, right? Sure, Riley. Timing, I said aloud. But in my head, another word echoed. Lies. The office grew noisy. Chatter, laughter, congratulations for Riley. I went back to my desk by the window overlooking downtown Seattle, the same desk where I'd spent thousands of hours fixing code, cleaning data, and saving deadlines no one else could. The Helix Tech project spreadsheet still glowed on my screen, the same project I had salvaged from collapse when the system crashed. Riley didn't even know the syntax I'd used to fix it. I stared at the monitor, not angry, just hollow. Around 2 in the afternoon, Mason messaged me to stop by his office. I knew the scene by heart. He'd offer polite words meant to sound comforting, a performance of appreciation without reward. His office was spacious, with glass walls overlooking the city. I sat in a swivel chair slightly lower than his desk, a small detail, but enough to tell me everything. Harper, I know this might be disappointing, but Riley showed the kind of initiative we're looking for in leadership. You have potential. You just need to learn to show yourself more. I almost laughed. I was the one who presented most of the technical strategies in the major meetings, and every single time he cut me off to summarize my points. Now he wanted to teach me how to express myself. Got it, Mason, I said quietly. I'll work on that. I stood before he could say another word. By late afternoon, rain began to fall. That steady, weary kind of rain Seattle was known for, like the whole city was sighing. I sat in my car, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching people flow in and out of the building. Riley came out with Mason, laughing, holding a bouquet someone had handed her. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just listened to the rain tapping the windshield and realized something simple. I'd spent too long waiting for someone else to acknowledge my worth. I unlocked my phone, opened a new note, and typed the first line, Plan B, freedom. I looked at the words for a long time. For the first time in years, I didn't feel numb anymore. If they didn't want me to rise, I'd walk out instead. And when I did, they'd finally understand what had been holding their entire system together all along. I started the car. The streetlights reflected off the wet glass. Seattle shimmered under the rain, and in my mind, everything became clear. The 11th rejection wasn't a failure, it was a beginning. That was the day I stopped asking for a seat at their table, because maybe it was time I built my own. I drove through the night with no destination in mind, just the need to get away from that building, the one that had swallowed 7 years of my life in spreadsheets, late night meetings, and the constant lie I told myself, just a little more effort and they'll finally see you. I took the winding streets of Queen Anne, where porch lights glowed amber and tilted rooftops made Seattle look a little less cold than usual. But nothing warm enough could reach the hollow growing inside me, the kind of emptiness that comes not from rejection, but from realizing I truly believed this time would be different. Because deep down, I still thought that if I worked hard enough, someone would eventually notice. When I finally got home, I dropped onto the couch in the dark. No lights, no music, just the sound of rain tapping against the window, and one question circling in my mind. What am I still trying for? My phone buzzed, breaking the quiet. A message from Casey, my best friend from college, who had worked at Summit for 8 months before realizing that place wasn't made for people who preferred competence over politics. She'd heard about Riley's promotion and sent a single text. Drink? 30 minutes later, we met at our usual bar on Capitol Hill, dim enough that no one needed to explain why their eyes were red. I told her everything: the 11th rejection, the excuses dressed up as constructive feedback, the nights I worked until 3 in the morning, the reports Mason presented as his own, the dashboards Riley asked me to fix before she got the credit. Casey didn't interrupt. She just listened, took a sip of her drink, and said what she always did: the truth, clean and sharp. You're stuck in a game you were never meant to win. I sat there, glass in hand, smiling faintly, while something inside me twisted. So what do I do, Case? Give up? She shook her head. No, don't give up. Just stop asking for permission. That sentence hit like a jolt of electricity. Stop asking for permission. Stop waiting for someone to nod before moving forward. Stop presenting, apologizing, and explaining in a game designed to keep you out. I didn't sleep that night. I stood up, grabbed the small whiteboard from my living room, the one I used to brainstorm project ideas. But this time, it wasn't for Summit. It was for me. Across the top, I wrote, what if I stopped playing by their rules? Then I drew 3 columns: what I bring, what they take, what I could build if I worked for myself. I started filling them in. They took my time, my ideas, my energy, my sleep. And in return, empty promises every quarter. A pat on the back for being indispensable, but not quite leadership material. A seat close enough to see the applause, but never to receive it. Then a question surfaced, sharp and bright as the first light after a storm. What if I spent the next 6 months working for myself? What if I poured the same intelligence, discipline, and precision into something that was mine? The next morning, I walked into the office as usual, but inside, something had shifted. I wasn't trying to be seen anymore. I was observing, studying, mapping my way out, like a strategist planning her escape from a maze she once tried to survive. Mason smiled when he passed me. Riley waved, her version of friendly. I smiled back. I'm good at pretending. They had no idea I'd stopped believing long ago. No idea there was already a plan forming. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the metal wall. No longer the eyes of someone waiting for approval. The eyes of someone already walking out of the game. That afternoon, I opened the note on my phone, the one that read Plan B, freedom. I deleted it, replaced it with 2 words: Project Nova, not a random name. In astronomy, a nova is a dying star that erupts into brilliance, burning brighter than ever before. I whispered it aloud, like a promise. No more waiting for chances to be handed to me. I'd make them myself. No more asking for a seat at their table. I'd build my own. And this time, I'd write the rules. They could reject me as many times as they wanted, but they would never get the chance to do it a 12th time. Ever since the day I named it Project Nova, something inside me started moving differently. I was still at the same desk on the 11th floor, still typing reports, still joining morning Zoom calls with clients on the East Coast. But something had shifted. I was no longer working for them. I was working for myself. When you stop working to be recognized and start working to leave, every move becomes deliberate. I began building a personal data vault, not company data, but mine. The processes I had designed, the automation scripts I had written, the documentation I had built, the incident workflows I had created for every major client, I called it the Knowledge Vault, a digital library encrypted and stored privately. I wasn't stealing anything. I was reclaiming what I'd built, the kind of knowledge that, if I walked out tomorrow, they wouldn't know how to function without. In meetings, I acted the same as always. When Riley asked me to check her dashboard for a new client, I helped. I even documented every fix, every patch I implemented to keep the project alive. Each PDF, each line of code was archived, gauche, not just for protection, but preparation. I started drawing what I called a dependency map, showing exactly which parts of the company's workflow still leaned entirely on me. From internal training guides to cross department automation links, my fingerprints were everywhere. Every morning, I arrived earlier than usual. Sitting in the corner cafe beneath the building, I opened my laptop and refined my plans line by line. I made a list of what to learn next: pitching, LLC paperwork, budgeting, and personal branding. I didn't want to just leave. I wanted to leave right, quietly, cleanly, without bitterness, but with an absence big enough that they'd finally admit it. She was irreplaceable. I began reviewing every connection I'd built over 7 years. Which clients trusted me enough to call my personal number when a system crashed? Who had sent thank you emails saying I'd saved their team from chaos? I collected them all in a separate sheet. One night, a client named Bill from Horizon Tech called at 10 p.m. because his data pipeline broke before a quarterly report. I fixed it in 15 minutes. The next morning, he sent a thank you note CCing Mason and Riley. Only I replied. Riley didn't. Mason's entire response was, "Glad it's resolved." Resolved. Just that. I started trimming emotion. When Riley got picked to attend the San Francisco Tech Summit, something I used to dream about, I only smiled. When Mason said in the next meeting that our team's success is built on collaboration, I didn't even flinch. I no longer cared about seeing my name on the presentation slides, because soon the only slide with my name on it would be the one introducing my own company. At night, instead of staying late, I went home early. I learned how to build a pitch deck. I read legal guides on registering soil business. I opened a separate bank account and began saving every small amount I could. I set coffee meetings with ex-colleagues who'd already left Summit under the pretense of catching up. But really, I was mapping exits. The more I prepared, the more I realized I didn't need rescuing. I just needed a solid plan and enough faith to walk myself out. One afternoon in March, sunlight streamed through the glass wall and hit my laptop screen. I looked at my Nova roadmap and realized I was already a third of the way through. I rested my fingers on the trackpad and added one final line to the plan. You don't need anyone to notice you're the best, as long as you know it and you're quietly using that brilliance to build something that lasts longer than praise. They still had no idea what was coming, and I was still smiling, quietly. When you've been quietly planning for nearly 2 months, there comes a strange moment. The moment you realize you've crossed the line between preparing and building. No more lists, no more half-finished notes, just action, real time, real money, real risk. I felt that moment on a Saturday morning, sitting in my small kitchen, a cold cup of coffee on the table, my laptop screen glowing with a single line of text. Nova Insight Consulting, Formation Application. One click. I took a deep breath and hit submit. In that moment, I didn't feel fear. I felt light. My name now belonged to something real, a company, a beginning. In the weeks that followed, I lived two lives: Summit by day, Nova by night, and weekend. I used every skill I had ever learned to turn Nova from a name on paper into something tangible. I designed the logo myself, simple, no bright colors, just three intersecting lines forming a star, representing the three values I wanted at its core: clarity, integrity, and independence. I bought the domain, built the website with the same tools I used for client projects, only this time it was for me. Every line of copy, every section of that homepage felt like I was speaking to my old self, the version of me who didn't know there was another option besides endurance. I didn't need an office yet. I rented a small co-working space in Fremont, quiet, filled with plants and natural light. One desk, one chair, one place to breathe as myself. Meanwhile, I began reconnecting with people I trusted. Not fake networking, not business cards at conferences, real coffee, real conversations. I started with those who had left Summit, now scattered across other firms. They told me stories: who was where, who was frustrated, who was quietly searching for a new data partner. One afternoon, during a talk with Lena, a former analytics director from a past project, she leaned in and whispered, "If you ever start your own firm, I'll be the first to send you a client." I laughed, didn't promise anything, but my pulse quickened. That wasn't theory anymore. That was momentum. I began writing a personal portfolio, not a resume. I documented case studies, how I cleaned data for a healthcare client, how I restructured internal workflows, how I salvaged a failing report hours before deadline. Not to claim I was good, but to prove I created a measurable impact. To stay cautious, I met with an intellectual property lawyer. I didn't want Summit to have any reason to drag me into court, even though I'd never signed a non-compete. I explained clearly, I'm not taking clients, not copying proprietary materials. I'm using my own skill set and relationships, the ones I built through 7 years of sleepless nights and relentless work. I remember one late night, sitting at my shared desk as light rain streaked the windows. I opened my Nova roadmap, now full of short-term goals, finalized 3 service proposals, create one demo dashboard, and identify 10 potential clients. Then I typed one more line at the bottom. Don't try to impress. Create impact. I didn't want their attention anymore. I wanted them to feel my absence like a real loss. And then one day, an email arrived from Zenith Labs, one of Summit's biggest clients. The sender, Bill, Director of Data. He wrote just one sentence. "Harper, I heard you're working independently now. Coffee sometime?" I froze for a second, hands hovering above the keyboard. This was it, the shift from blueprint to reality. I replied, "Absolutely. Thursday afternoon, Fremont?" When I arrived at the cafe, Bill was already there. No small talk, no corporate tone. He looked straight at me and said, "I've never seen Summit this disorganized since you left the project. They've lost control. We need clarity. We need someone who understands both data and people." I smiled, pulled a one-page service brief from my bag, and placed it on the table. "Then I think we can work together." Nova was no longer an idea. It was becoming real. One client, one decision, one act of quiet courage at a time. I always thought the day I quit would be dramatic. Maybe I'd stand up in a meeting and say I'd had enough, or post a long, righteous essay on LinkedIn about all the times I was overlooked, but kept showing up anyway. But in the end, the day I resigned was quiet. No fireworks, no witness. No one saw it coming but me. That morning started like any other. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and checked my emails. Then I pulled up a Word file I'd written 2 weeks earlier and read it one last time, just to be sure. The title, Resignation Letter, Harper Lane. It was short, polite, and precise. No emotion, no blame, just one clear message. This chapter is done, and it's time to turn the page. I printed it, folded it neatly into thirds, and slipped it into a white envelope. When I left home, Seattle was gray as usual, but inside I felt strangely light, like I'd finally taken off a damp coat I'd been wearing for 7 years without noticing. I waited until 10. When Mason returned from his finance meeting, I knocked on his door. "Got a minute?" I asked calmly. He nodded, motioning for me to sit, still unaware of what was coming. I placed the envelope on his desk. "I'm officially resigning. I'll be leaving Summit in 2 weeks. No explanations, no apologies." Mason raised an eyebrow, silent for a few seconds, studying me like he wasn't sure if this was real. Then he smiled, the kind of practiced smile managers use when they're buying time. "Harper, if this is about the promotion, we can revisit that conversation. I already have plans for next quarter. Don't make a hasty move." I met his eyes. "It's not about the promotion, and it's not hasty. It's a decision I've thought through. I'm leaving because I finally have my own direction." He nodded slowly, his face tightening. "We'll miss you." "I know," I said, and stood. As the door closed behind me, every step back to my desk felt like walking out of a room that had long run out of air. The news spread fast. Some people looked shocked. Some came by to ask if something had happened. Riley stopped at my desk and gave a small smirk. "So you're leaving? Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. I didn't owe her an explanation. Not to the person who once saw me as an obstacle and now realized I'd been the foundation. The next day, Mason called for a meeting. This time, HR was there. So was Helen from Project Ops. The air felt cautious, like something fragile was on the table. "Harper," Mason started, "we've reviewed things. And honestly, we don't want to lose you. We're ready to offer you the senior strategist role with a 20% raise." I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it coming, but instead of feeling triumphant, I felt detached. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I already have other plans. This time, I'm not chasing recognition. I'm choosing freedom." Mason's tone hardened. "Harper, this isn't about emotions. We're talking about opportunity. You're turning down a solid career path." I kept my gaze steady. "I'm not rejecting the path. I'm just not choosing yours." After that, the atmosphere changed. No one said anything directly, but I could feel it. The cautious glances, the hushed talks that stopped when I entered a room. Mason barely spoke to me. Riley was suddenly professional, maybe realizing how much she didn't know, and how many questions in the next 2 weeks only I could answer. I spent my last days finishing the handover, not because they asked, but because I wanted to leave clean. I wrote documentation, organized systems, and detailed every process. I made sure I walked out standing tall. No mess, no bitterness. One afternoon, I stood on the 11th floor balcony, looking at the office I'd once stayed late in, the place that had seen every rejection, every quiet breakdown. Now, it all looked smaller. Not because the company had changed, but because I had outgrown it. On my final Monday, I walked in with a small box, a few notebooks, a cactus, and a coffee mug that said, "Let data speak." I didn't need much. As I stepped out of the elevator, Mason was waiting in the hall. "Still going through with it?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "You'll regret this," he said. I smiled. I already regretted staying too long. Not anymore. I didn't need applause. I just needed to leave with peace and purpose. And that's exactly what I did. I never went back to Summit after that last day. I didn't look up at the building one more time. I didn't need to. I'd left with everything that mattered: dignity, clarity, and a company that carried my own name. I figured they'd keep their composure for the first few weeks. Mason would hold a few meetings to boost morale. Riley would pretend she wasn't affected. They'd probably send out an internal email thanking me for my years of contribution, and then life at Summit would move on as if I'd never existed. At least that's what they thought. What they didn't understand was this: I wasn't just an employee who left. I was part of the structure holding their system together. The first sign came faster than I expected. A week after I left, I got a text from Ethan, one of the junior data engineers who used to be on my team. "Harper, they can't access the Helix quarterly forecast pipeline." Riley's panicking. Mason's asking if anyone has a copy of your automation protocol. I'm not saying anything, but they're freaking out. I read it, didn't reply. I didn't need to. This was the natural consequence of treating the person who built the system as if they were disposable. By week 2, Casey texted me at noon. "Rumor is, clients are getting restless. No one understands the reports the way you did. Summit's in full damage control mode." I still said nothing. Not out of pride, but because I already knew this was coming. I'd seen it in every meeting where people assumed my work was just data analysis. They didn't see me up at 2 a.m. debugging failed scripts. They didn't see me fixing broken APIs mid-client call or rewriting report logic so it wouldn't collapse under load. And now that I was gone, everything automated suddenly stopped working. Because it was never automated, it was me. At the end of the second week, a call came in from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out until I saw the name, Bill, from Zenith Labs. "Harper," he said without preamble, "Summit's in chaos. Our new project's already a week behind. Riley can't answer basic questions. I need to ask, are you taking new contracts? I took a slow breath. Bill, I don't steal clients from Summit. I didn't say steal. I said Summit's not delivering, and I need someone who can. I paused. Nova Insight can draft a proposal. Next week? Perfect, Meg, he said. I'll be waiting. When I hung up, I just sat there for a while. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't poaching or scheming. I was simply doing my job. Better, cleaner, freer. Over the next few days, messages trickled in. A former colleague sent a photo of the whiteboard in the office where they were trying to recreate my workflow, piecing it together from memory. Another wrote, Riley just left a meeting white as a sheet. HealthCore's dashboard failed again. No one can debug it. They don't even understand. Why your old reports worked. I didn't say it, but I knew exactly why. That dashboard was one I'd rebuilt from scratch, but under time pressure, I never documented it for user handoff. Mason had waved it off at the time. Doesn't matter, as long as it runs. Well, let's see how that's working out now. By week 3, I was sitting across a conference table at a tech firm overlooking Lake Union, the same firm whose director I'd once met for coffee months ago. They'd heard I'd gone independent and wanted Nova to audit their entire analytics system. As I presented Nova's first proposal, laptop open, slides projected, every eye in the room fixed on me. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I wasn't asking for a seat. I was leading the table. Back at Summit, things were unraveling fast. Mason kept up appearances, but the meeting load doubled. Riley stayed, but she'd stopped talking in team calls. Someone told me they were bringing in an external consultant to conduct an internal review. I almost laughed. They'd had that consultant for 7 years. They just never noticed. I wasn't the reason they failed. I was the reason they hadn't, until I left. I thought that by leaving Summit quietly, they'd let it end the same way, quietly. I hadn't exposed anyone. I hadn't taken clients. I hadn't written a bitter farewell email. I believed that professionalism would, at the very least, be met with silence. I was wrong. 4 weeks after I left, right in the middle of pitching a new client, an email popped up from Summit Dynamics legal counsel. Subject line, breach of confidentiality, legal notice. I read it twice, hoping I'd misread. But no, it was exactly what it looked like, a threat of legal action. They accused me of violating the company's confidentiality agreement and illegally approaching existing clients. 8 pages long. 3 clients listed, including Zenith Labs, the one whose CEO had contacted me first. And then the final line, we demand that Ms. Harper Lane cease all business activity with clients under Summit Dynamics' network within 5 days, or legal action will be taken. I sat still, not afraid, just deeply disappointed. I'd always known Mason was cold, but I'd given him credit for fairness. Now I saw what fear of losing control could do to a man, how easily power could twist truth. That night, I called Casey. She could tell from my voice that something was wrong. I told her everything. She was quiet for a second, then said, They just picked the wrong person to mess with. Within hours, we looped in Tasha, Casey's friend, a corporate attorney who specialized in small businesses and startups. Meeting her the next morning was the smartest move I'd made through all of this. Tasha read the notice carefully, then asked, Did you ever sign a non-compete at Summit? I went through my old files, the stacks of documents I once thought I'd never need. Just as I remembered, there was no such clause. Tasha smiled. Then this is bluffing, a scare tactic. They're hoping you'll back down on your own. I'm not scared, I said quietly. I'm angry. In the days that followed, I saw the ripple effect of that email. One potential client, a deal already mid-discussion, suddenly went silent. Later, I heard Mason had called their director directly, implying that I was under legal dispute and not trustworthy. I didn't respond publicly, but inside, a fire lit up. I hadn't sabotaged them. I'd simply walked away, and they were reacting as if I'd stolen their entire empire. Then something unexpected happened. One evening, while I was at Nova's office, Tasha walked in holding a small USB drive, her expression serious. You should see this, she said. Inside the drive was a hidden folder, no sender name, just a short text file that reads, They're not just cowardly, they're lying. These are Mason's emails to legal. We opened them one by one. The first was from Mason himself, sent the week before. Subject: Need leverage. She's becoming a real threat. The body made everything clear. Direct instructions to the legal team to tie Harper to a confidentiality breach, even though no such clause existed, and to apply legal pressure to stall Nova's growth. Tasha exhaled. This is solid evidence. I sat there, stunned but not surprised. They'd chosen to play dirty, and worse, they'd been predictable about it. Tasha's tone shifted. I'm not just replying to this. I'm sending it straight to the industry ethics board, and if necessary, we go public. I nodded, feeling the weight lift, not because I'd already won, but because this time I wasn't fighting alone. 3 days later, Summit withdrew the complaint. No apology, no clarification. Just silence, the kind they should have chosen in the first place. But Tasha didn't stop there. She filed a formal grievance with the Tech Industry Association, where Summit held membership. A week later, I was invited to speak at a small panel on professional freedom in the data industry. It was the first time I told my story, not out of bitterness, but as proof. Proof that you can walk away without bowing your head. I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I stopped playing by their rules. I wrote my own, and I wrote them in truth. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after a storm. Not triumph, not relief, but a calm so pure it almost feels unnatural. It's like standing in a room that used to echo with shouting, and suddenly everything goes still. After Summit quietly withdrew its lawsuit after Tasha sent the evidence to the ethics board and industry councils, I didn't feel the rush of victory I'd imagined. What I felt instead was clarity. The game had changed, permanently. I wasn't the woman who won a legal battle. I was the woman who stood up. And in the corporate world, especially for women, that's no small thing. The emails started coming in. Not the cautious kind asking, "Are you still active?" but direct ones. "We'd like to work with Nova. Can you re-engineer our entire data system? Does Nova handle full-scale deployments?" Even people I used to pass in Summit's hallways, the ones who never made eye contact, were now messaging me on LinkedIn. "I've been following your story. Thank you for doing what so many of us only dream about." I was never the type who wanted attention. I'd always been the one in the background, the person who made things work. But somehow I had become something larger than data and dashboards. I'd become proof that you can walk away and still win. Nova Insight entered its first real growth phase. My first hire was Juno, a young analyst who'd interned at Summit but never got a full-time offer despite her clear skill. I didn't need to ask much. The way she handled a messy data set without hesitation told me everything. She was my younger self, just earlier in the story. Then came the second hire, a systems engineer who left a big firm, worn out by bureaucracy. Then a consultant from my healthcare days. Each person who joined Nova carried a version of my past, overlooked once, underestimated often, but ready to build something honest. We didn't have a fancy office, just a shared workspace, a good cloud system, and late-night Zoom calls filled with ideas. But we had something Summit never did: trust and transparency. One weekend evening, I got a call from someone I didn't expect: Ethan, the data engineer who had sent me the USB with Mason's internal emails. He wanted to meet for coffee near South Lake Union. He looked different when he arrived: relaxed, unarmored, like someone who'd finally exhaled. "Harper," he said after the small talk, "I didn't send those emails just to help you. I sent them to help myself." I stayed quiet. "For years, I watched you hold that system together. I watched them use you. And I stayed silent, like everyone else. But when they tried to sue you for something you didn't do, I realized if I stayed quiet again, I'd be part of it." I said softly, "Thank you for not staying silent forever." He smiled faintly. "You're not just building a company, Harper. You're rebuilding what value is supposed to mean at work." Not long after, an email arrived from the organizers of Tech Forward Conference, one of the biggest events for founders in data and AI. We'd love for you to share your journey, how you built something new after leaving a toxic environment. It's a story a lot of people, especially women in tech, need to hear. I hesitated for a few days. I'd never imagined myself on a stage telling my story. But then I remembered how I'd felt after the lawsuit. Not afraid, just light. And I knew, if I didn't speak, someone out there would still believe they were wrong for walking away. I said yes. The day of the talk, there were no theatrics, just me, a microphone, and more than 200 people in the room. I started simply. I used to think I needed a promotion to prove my worth. Now I know all I ever needed was to decide not to stay where I wasn't seen. I told my story plainly. No drama, no victimhood, just truth. With every chapter, I saw heads nodding. Some people took notes, some wiped tears, some just stared, recognizing themselves in my words. When I finished, the room rose in a standing ovation. But what moved me most was what happened next. A middle-aged woman approached me, took my hand, and said quietly, "Thank you for going first. Now I know I can walk out too." That was when I understood. This was never just my fight. It was for everyone who's ever felt like an outsider in a system that was never built for them to begin with. 2 years after I walked out of Summit Dynamics, I stood in front of Nova Insight's new office, a two-story space filled with sunlight in a creative district just outside Seattle. The glass door carried our name in clean black letters, Nova Insight Consulting, and beneath it, the tagline I wrote on a sleepless night long ago, "Let clarity lead." Inside, 18 people were working. No time tracking, no micromanagement, no performance quotas. Yet everything ran smoothly. No, it soared. I no longer worked 60-hour weeks. I didn't stay up fixing other people's mistakes. I led strategy. I mentored. I built a version of consulting that didn't demand exhaustion as proof of loyalty or titles as proof of worth. Casey was now head of business development. She could turn a small talk over coffee into a six-figure contract. Juno, once a rejected intern, was leading our analytics team and had just been invited to speak at a healthcare data conference. And Ethan, the one who helped me stand through Summit's storm, was now our director of operations. Nova, he once told me, is the first place I've ever worked where I can just do my job without pretending to care about office politics. We weren't just coworkers. We were a new generation of people once crushed by the old system, now building our own. A system with room for difference, for integrity, for success, that doesn't demand self-erasure. One spring morning, a message popped up on my LinkedIn. Sender, Riley Summers. Just one line. Can we meet? I need an honest conversation. I hesitated. Part of me still remembered her smirk after that 11th promotion. But I've never been someone who holds grudges. I hold standards. And if someone knocks with sincerity, I'll open the door as long as they walk in as themselves. We met at a cafe in Fremont. Riley looked different, no heavy makeup, no polished confidence. Just a woman who looked tired. "I'm sorry," she said the moment she sat down. "For everything, for how I treated you, for staying silent when I knew you were being cornered, and for seeing you as a threat." I said nothing. I let her speak. She told me that after I left, she was pushed into the very seat she'd once envied, only to find it was a trap. Watched, overburdened, undersupported. "I thought promotion was a reward," she said softly. "Turns out it was the cage." At the end, she looked at me and asked quietly, "Does Nova have room for someone who once chose wrong?" I studied her face and saw something I once had too, the desire to start over, not to rise higher, but to be right this time. "Send me your resume," I said. No fluff, just truth. 6 months later, Riley was Nova's client director. Not because I wanted to redeem her, but because I believe something deeply. Sometimes the ones who've gone astray become the best guides if they've learned from the journey. And she proved it, brilliantly, every time I watched her. Handle a demanding client with calm and grace. I knew forgiveness, too, can restore justice, not through vengeance, but through a second chance given at the right time. As for Summit Dynamics, they're still around, but only as a shadow. A year after I left, Mason was replaced. Helen resigned. Riley was the last of the old guard to walk out of that building, and the only one brave enough to say, I was wrong. I heard Summit downsized, lost 40% of their core clients, and started partnering with smaller firms just to stay afloat. Their legal department even emailed me once about a strategic collaboration. I didn't reply, not out of pride, but because I'd gone too far forward to ever look back for permission again. One autumn evening, I stood before the Nova team at our annual review. We'd tripled our first year revenue. We had clients across 7 states. But what made me proud wasn't the numbers. It was this: everyone in that room had a voice. No one had to prove they deserved to be heard. No one got interrupted mid sentence. No one's success existed at the expense of someone else's silence. After the meeting, I stepped out to the balcony. The wind was cool. Seattle, for once, wasn't raining. I closed my eyes and thought of that old version of me, the woman sitting alone in her car, gripping a resignation letter, heart pounding like a drum. The woman who wondered if she was destroying everything. If I could go back, I'd tell her, you're not destroying anything, Harper. You're rebuilding. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who will come after you. Freedom doesn't begin the day you leave something broken. It begins the day you believe you deserve something better. And sometimes, the only way to find it is to build it from scratch. If you've listened this far, thank you. I don't know where you are in your own story. Maybe you're still sitting in that parking garage somewhere, holding your resignation letter, wondering if you're doing the right thing. If so, I hope this story reminds you you're not alone. You're not wrong for wanting to be seen, and you don't need permission to walk away. If any part of this story spoke to you, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Tell me where you are on your journey, whether it's your first step or your halfway point. And if you want to keep hearing real stories about real people who walked out of unfair systems to build something better, don't forget to hit subscribe, because maybe the next story you need to hear is the one waiting in the next video.